But part of the work that I'm doing, and also when I tweet or I'm engaging in discussions, is not just being someone who's a founder of a startup brand that's bringing food and fashion experiences from emerging countries like Bangladesh. I like to talk, where possible, of the feminism that inspires me to bring about social impact. And before I go on to that, I come back to the story of Khadija. I became a feminist when I realised that actually the equality or the power of the woman was very much a strong theme in the story of Prophet Muhammad and in the book. So, for example, I find it interesting that there's not much talked about within a wider context about the fact that Prophet Muhammad married someone who was much older than him. Secondly, his first wife was a very wealthy woman in her own right, and she used money to fund the spread of Islam. And without her money, I'm not sure that Islam would have been as powerful as it is today. And in fact, when they say that the revelation came to Prophet Muhammad, he was obviously very, very in shock and was quite distressed and alarmed with this visitation he'd had from the angel Gabriel, and had gone running back home in a state of distress. And again, the stories are recounting about how it was Khadija, his wife, who actually listened to him very calmly and took him to her cousin, where it was confirmed that yes, he was indeed the messenger of mankind or humanity. So that's where the feminism started to be of great interest to me. But what's also remarkable is, what does feminism mean today in the modern world as a Muslim woman? And that's why I wanted to pick up and talk about Lovedesh. So I went to Bangladesh, and having worked in the city and expected to have a life trajectory, which didn't go to plan, by the way, I ended up becoming a single mother. I went to Bangladesh, and for the first time I started to enjoy it. And the reason I enjoyed it is, I think something happens when your father dies. In that kind of community, with the father absent, there's less of a requirement to fit a certain maybe idea of how you should behave or how you spend your time. So in a way, I was left to my own devices, and I started exploring Bangladesh in a way I'd never done before, which meant cutting away from the families, the relatives, the constant, as we call them, meal times, which are lovely, don't get me wrong. But I started to notice the social injustice and how I, as a British citizen, was going to Bangladesh, but when I got there, there was real social class divide. And of course, I would be there with my family, but I would often look at the people who might be cooking our food, the people in our village when I was taken to stay there, who would be quietly maybe sorting the rice, or maybe cutting up all the vegetables, or just maybe doing the daily chores. And I started looking at the social injustice and the stories that they told me, which broke my heart. But when I started travelling alone is when I really connected with them. And my father did so much, like many actually, British Bangladeshis, especially those who've had curry houses. They give back and they spend a lot of money to fund philanthropic initiatives, be it masjids, mosques, or maybe educational institutions, which he'd also done. But in 2009, and then I went repeatedly, 2011, to the women, and especially the impoverished men I met, what can I do? Why? What is it? And what they told me was, we need jobs. We're sick and tired of not being able to escape this rat race of life. And please, if you can just give us jobs. Nobody wants to give us jobs. and all I want is a future for my kids. And I realised, actually, because what happens a lot is when British Bangladeshi people go across to Bangladesh, there'll be a lot of handouts, or especially during the time of Ramadan, the second Eid, we call it Bakra Eid, where there is animal sacrifice. The local villagers might get meat. But when I looked at it, I thought, where's the job creation? And just a reminder, in 2013, Rana Plaza, those of you who might already be aware, in 2013, 1,134 people died in that factory fire where garment workers were killed. So add my trips, add the fact that many Bangladeshi people, very talented artisans I was coming across, be it the food they were creating, be it the village women who I would walk with, and within 1 hour, walking around the paddy fields for an hour, would bring back 20 versions of, and it's their way of foraging, vegetable or plants that they would cook and say, look, this is how we survive. At the 2013, I said to them, let me see what I can do. That's all. And that's where I guess Lovedesh was born, out of a sense of the feminism that I've been exploring in my own journey, and the day-to-day struggles that I had witnessed and observed in Bangladesh, which really moved me. And where I am today is that it's been a very bitter, lonely struggle, but one that I relish and enjoy. I often think that it says here, do good, for God loves those who do good. And actually, kicking off after today, I'm actually started a roadshow where I actually call it a whistleblower's tour, and I talk about highs and lows, or the horrors of sometimes trying to deliver good. Lovedesh was conceived, and Lovedesh is a luxury brand bringing food and fashion experiences. But the interesting thing is the social impact that Lovedesh wants to deliver is threefold. And one of the first is the idea that we smash the stigma surrounding some of the countries that are deemed, and I say this always in inverted commas, third world. So if I said to any of you guys or ladies sitting here today and said, hands up, would you think of travelling to somewhere like Bangladesh or Somalia for a holiday? Hands up if any of us would. One, and that's, thank you very much. Where I'm going with this is this. Lovedesh is a concept that I finally devised where I'm hoping I deliver something along the lines of, imagine Chanel meets Oxfam, and done by bringing very exquisite handcrafted fashion and food experiences to British people in a bid to smash the stigma so that people can experience some of these countries differently, starting with my heritage nation of Bangladesh. Okay? So that's the first way. Second way is, after examining what can we do for the people in these countries who are very talented, who keep saying, look, I want a job, is looking at each country and looking at all the artisanal skills that they have, be it in food or fashion. And I came across weavers who are weaving very, very beautiful heritage indigenous textiles. Now, I don't know if you already know, but Bangladesh, or the area that Bangladesh now occupies, was once a major producer of muslin. And the original muslin has disappeared from the world. It's not available because that artistry has disappeared. So The other way Lovedesh is making social impact is to create demand for these kind of textiles. I don't know if you know or have heard of jamdani, which is a very beautiful textile, still woven on wooden looms, but it's not currently really available anywhere, as far as I know, in Europe. And I work with these artisans. I then started exploring some of the fabrics in some of the countries in Africa. So there's things like mud prints or people dyeing cloths in indigo. And again, I'm really worried that these textiles are losing their skill set, and how do we protect that? And that's when I thought, okay, is it possible to have a luxury brand that actually works in bringing these textiles in a way that will be attractive to those who are buying within the luxury sector? And my search, not just for artisanal textiles in Bangladesh, takes me, in all kinds of journeys. I've also started to explore the textile heritage in the UK and bring the two of them together. So that's the second way that Lovedesh actually is trying to make social impact. But here's the other thing, the third thing. 24th of April will be the 5th anniversary of the Rana Plaza incident. And at the moment there's a huge, I believe, battle between those working in the charitable sector to protect the workers' rights and the Bangladesh garment factories, because there's a system of health and safety checks called Accord, which was put in place in 2013. Apparently that's under threat and might disappear. So all of that is kicking off, and I believe 7th of April is when the next date the Bangladesh government will announce whether or not they're keeping to those regulations, or if that's going to change. And if it does, there's going to be a huge implication. But where I'm going with this is the fast fashion consumption, that I myself have been guilty of. And it's a very hard thing. And I understand that the British government is thinking of introducing a penny tax on fast fashion, very cheap fashion, which is instantly mobilised, and you see all these many sites now online where you can get a top for £8 or whatever. What's happening now is that founders of brands or people in the ethical luxury sector are starting to make noise. And I think it's interesting from an Islamic perspective, is that us Muslims as well should be asking questions of who made our clothes. And why is it that when it comes to feminism doesn't often include our brown sisters or our black sisters who are, in Asian and African countries? And that disturbs me greatly. I think we can do better, and I don't actually, and I'm not here to lecture consumers, no. Actually, I believe the power starts, and the stewardship of protecting these workers starts with brands. Now, I want to focus a bit about the garment workers in Bangladesh. How much do you think that on an average they get paid a month?
Equivalent of £50.
Interesting, yeah. Any others? Do you have a view? Well, recently, I don't know if you've heard, but sadly, and it often happens, I think there was a Guardian article about the Spice Girls t-shirt, which had gone on sale just before Christmas. I want to be a Spice Girl, and I think that t-shirt was being sold to actually help raise funds for Comic Relief, who were trying to do some empowerment work to help women. But it transpires that I think some of the workers were getting paid 20 pence an hour or something like that. The thing is, the average salary is around $30, $40, and what's happening is the living wage within Dhaka really is about $250. By the time you take into account renting a room in one of the slums, and why a lot of Bangladeshi women who are garment workers, and there's 3 million in Dhaka, of which 85% are women, they end up doing overtime, as naturally they would. So what I wanted to address here is the feminism from an Islamic perspective and the idea that we deliver good, but going back to the story of Khadija, Prophet Muhammad's wife, and how money can be utilised to deliver good. And so one of the things, the third social impact that Lovedesh is seeking to make is this. Now, whether or not I succeed remains to be seen, but it is quite a task. So aside from smashing the stigma, aside from actually protecting the heritage skills and textiles that might be lost to us, is the third aspect, which is actually to pay a living wage, but actually bring some of the garment workers in for a sabbatical into the UK and to fund a workshop, so that when it comes to Lovedesh's fashion range, which is currently a fashion range, accessories, we're working with these women. We try and obviously want to pay a living wage and actually start the conversation about who really does make our clothes and can there be different options, because I think it's going to be a while before we as consumers in any way can impact and change the way that the current fast clothing sector works. And I guess that and people say to me, and this is the other thing, Lovedesh is a luxury brand. Now, again, throwing it out to you, what do you think luxury means? The word luxury. If I was to ask, when you think of luxury and that word, what does that mean to you?
High quality.
High quality, yeah.
Something you don't really absolutely need.
Something you don't need. It's not a necessity, yeah. Because we say, oh, it's a luxury. Any other?
A rare commodity.
Yeah, rare commodity, something that's rare. Any other?
Expensive.
Expense is often attached to luxury. When I thought about, and interestingly, in 2015, I had to temporarily shelve Lovedesh, but Lovedesh was due to be launched back in 2015, and I was really surprised. I was already winning awards. There was such a phenomenal interest from journalists. But back then, it wasn't luxury. And then I had to take a 3-year hiatus. And it's all worked out well anyway, because my daughter's in the room and she's going to turn 18 this summer, and actually she's coming on board, so it'll be a mother and daughter brand. But now in 2019, that hiatus, that time away, got me thinking, because back then it wasn't luxury, but then last year I thought, once I was making plans to bring it out of ice and launch it this year, I said, no, oh my gosh, Eureka, why? Of course it should be luxury. Because when I looked at the definition in the Oxford, and my personal favourite is the Oxford definition, luxury is defined as a state of great comfort or elegance, especially when involving great expense. So for example, he lived a life of luxury. But here's the definition in the Oxford Dictionary of it, the word luxury as a noun. An inessential, desirable item which is expensive or difficult to obtain. Human sweat, human toil and labour, and the sacrifices that these women, and there are men involved as well, but go towards providing us with the clothes, is life and death. But secondly, that's the garment workers. When I look and I talk to the individuals that I've met and the artisans who are weaving the textiles that I'm bringing across to actually make my handcrafted accessories, they told me that often it can take months, if not up to a year, to learn the trade of or the skill of weaving. And it's so beautiful, it's so fine, it's incredible. When I speak to people working with the Pashmina artisans, and they're very much based in Kashmir, that region, It's a lifelong skill and it's dying. But if you look at the prices for these items, either they're non-existent, when they are, some can be sold at luxury prices, but the luxury prices aren't being passed on to the workers. And that's something that I hope, through Lovedesh and having conversations like this, we can start asking that they should be. And so, when I have been challenged, oh, you're a luxury brand, but Bangladesh, oh. Again, it's that perception. The idea that Bangladesh can't be viewed as anything else but through the lens of some kind of poverty porn, where actually Bangladeshis have to be rescued by people in the West or NGOs or humanitarian missions. And the Bangladeshis themselves have said to me, when it comes to jobs, we don't need rescuing. We've got skills. Just pay us for us, and you'll see that, you know what, that will be the transformation. That's the kind of Islam that we're seeking from our brothers and sisters abroad. So just bringing it to kind of like conclusion, because I have brought along a film I made, and this was back in 2014, and I'll just show you that in a second. But here's the thing: luxury and feminism, they are not mutually exclusive. I'm absolutely frightened about what I'm about to embark on, because on 24th of April I will be bringing out t-shirts and designs to help remember the people who lost their lives. I also want to do it in a way which isn't at all lecturing or at all accusatory of consumers. Funnily enough, you see me sitting here today, this top I bought in Bangladesh. One of the fashion accessories that Lovedesh is bringing out is this leather bracelet, but I keep this leather bracelet, which is not the one that will be sold, on my wrists always, nearly every day, because this was the prototype that I looked at making out in Bangladesh. And when I talk about ethical fashion, nobody's really ethical. It's very hard. You can't be 100% ethical, but I try and be. And when I was actually getting this bracelet made, ethical fashion, which is a nod towards halal fashion as well, because halal fashion, in my opinion, isn't just about how or what you look like. It's about who made your clothes, where it comes from, you know, the environmental aspect to it, and doing as much as you can to not impact the world or humanity in the process of getting something. And when I look back to this bracelet, I remember having to make the very, very traumatic decision, because of course, if you want to have your brand, isn't it a brilliant idea to get it made in Bangladesh, isn't it? I couldn't. And that's why my idea is to bring some of them here, because I can't guarantee the health and safety conditions. As I mentioned, even the Spice Girls, who with all their best intentions, and I'm sure they weren't aware, and they had comic relief involved, couldn't guarantee how that t-shirt was made. When I got this bracelet made, I found out that actually the leather, and you look at it, it's red. You know, leather's not red, it needs to be dyed. The conditions involved in actually dyeing this leather and potential aspects of child labour involved frightened the hell out of me. And so it's a huge responsibility to try and bring all these aspects together. And all I can say is, before I wrap up my talk, is I hope if there's one message that I thought, and I'd be keen to hear from yourselves as well, but if there's one message I'd say is this, is I don't think it's the responsibility of the consumers to actually change workers' conditions. I know actually, if you ask the average consumer, do you care? Of course we all care. But actually the responsibility lies with those of us in this sector, be it as a brand or a manufacturer or a factory, but especially us who are in Europe or in the UK, because we have that stewardship, we have that responsibility. And one thing I'm really excited about is finding out if there's more brands or fashion initiatives being led by Muslims, especially Muslims, and I hope to see that conversation happens a bit more. So that's where I'll leave it, but I'm just going to, if I may, while I've got time, take you on a bit of a journey to Bangladesh. And this is a film that I made, and interestingly, before I play it, I actually shot, produced and directed this little movie, or this little film, all from a chair somewhere in my office in southwest London. And why I mention that, it shows the remarkable tenacity of the people in this film, who mainly were obviously Bangladeshis. And the theme of this film that we'd done was to address the question, can we travel, in inverted comma, the third world? And what can we do to actually change our perception and experience of these countries? And going to the Bangladeshis themselves and asking them, what's your opinion of some of the countries that are deemed to be quite, economically, economically still growing? And it was fascinating to hear their response and learn from them their opinions about nations in Africa, and asking them, well, here's a list of some of the countries that Lovedesh is seeking to work with or actually help smash the stigma. Which countries would you choose? And I found their response was absolutely brilliant. And it's been a real privilege, and I hope I continue to do so, working with the incredible, talented, everyday grassroots people of Bangladesh.